Hey Abby, welcome to Devil Stories podcast.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm really excited too. So excited. And I've been excited since we did our prep call for this. So I'm really excited
Me
to to
too.
to bring to bring you to the Devil Stories podcast and help your She Makes It Work crew. Um Speaking of She Makes It Work, tell us what your mission is, because it's amazing and I want the listeners to hear all about it.
Yeah. My business partner Gabby and I, so She Makes It Work with Gabby and Abby. It's catchy. Um,
It is
our
catchy.
our passion and our mission is to educate and empower women in the workplace around really anything we need. We as women and really anyone ongoing learner needs to understand. The things that no one really teaches you, the things you've had to learn on your own. We've had to learn on our own. Taking off the corporate mask, having the real conversations, because everyone knows that you can go to HR for some things, but they're not. HR works for the company, right? And so we want to
Right.
work for you and help everyone just learn things like we love doing. We have a YouTube channel where we talk about interesting topics, things again we wish we would have known. And then we do YouTube shorts, like I've done YouTube shorts on, hey, did you know you can negotiate more than just your salary? Or, here's some time management tips. Really things that, again, we always want to be the resource we wish we had. Gabby and I have been in the workplace for over 20 years, and I've been in tech. I've been in Salesforce since 2011. Gabby is even higher level than I am and has seen, the executive leadership behind the scenes, and kind of want to do like give the real of just what goes on in the workplace, what to do, what not to do, and really want to make She Makes It Work be the go-to place for women's empowerment, education, and professional development.
Oh, so it's an amazing mission, and you say kind of take the mask off corporate. I think was the phrase that you used.
Yeah.
What does that mean, or what are some of those things that are masked that you kind of see more commonly that women in
Yeah.
the workspace don't know about?
That's a great question. There's so many. There's you kind of the corporate speak of, here we're wrapping feedback in this language that doesn't sound like you kind of unpack that. Like, what does that really mean in so far as like actions of what do I do next, right? I got this kind of flowery feedback. What does that really mean? And how to make sure you're represented well in the rooms you're not in, right? That's a big
Yeah,
thing for us, is so that you can understand the impact of how you're showing up, how that impacts leadership conversations in the rooms that you're not in. So things like that impact your promotions, your salary, and things like that. But also for me, being a single mom, taking off the corporate mask of what we call covering. And covering is an example, or it's a term used to describe pretending that something doesn't exist. So for me, how that showed up for me, I would cover for being a single mom, meaning I would feel like I had to show up as if I didn't have a child. I couldn't leave for doctor's appointments. I couldn't leave to go get my kid because I had to show up as a childless person, and pretending that I didn't have these other commitments in my life while I was at work, not abandoning my child, but pretending that I didn't have those things really took a lot of mental load, so such that it prevented me from bringing my full genius to work, my whole self. And that's one thing we are really passionate about, is bringing your whole self to work, feeling safe to do so. And when you bring your whole self to work, you bring your true genius with you. When you feel like you have to fit into a box, you shave off those edges that make you you and make you unique, and that are your unique genius. So, really setting those things down, working through those, a lot of shame around, oh, I should be doing X, I should be doing Y, whether that's with, working with your brain or against it. So really, kind of giving that behind the scenes look of kind of being like your aunties at work, right? Like you're like your work bestie. It's like, okay, they said this, but like, what do they really mean? And really helping kind of decode corporate talk and the corporate environment.
yeah, yeah. I think that's something that a lot of folks struggle with at any point in their career, especially if I think long gone are the days where we spend the bulk of our career in one place.
Right.
And when we hop between organizations 3, 4, 5 years, stints in each of these places, like corporate speak shifts slightly in between each environment, and having that authenticity to bring yourself and what you've said is your true genius to each place can be demanding. And it's interesting you say true genius. What does true genius mean to you, or what's that concept all about, and how do we find it?
Great question. We did an episode on finding your inner genius on our YouTube channel. There is an actual test you can take. It's called the 6 Working Geniuses. I can send you the link, or we can talk about that later. But
yeah, we'll put it in the description.
Yeah, that actually really helped me, because it's what your genius is. What I mean when I say that, or when the test means when it says that, is it's what fills your cup. What can you do that you can do and you feel fulfilled, and you bring joy, or it brings you joy to do those things. And when you're operating outside of that, there's 2 more zones. One's like a working competency. It's things that you can do or you've had to get good at, and you can do from, it doesn't drain you, but it also doesn't fill your cup. Then there's these frustration zones that when you work in those long term, they drain you. That's when you leave work and you're just like, you've got nothing left to give. And that's where you really want to stay out of that. So identifying that first is key, right? You can't fix what you're not aware of. But really trying to do as much as you can in your genius, because when you're in your genius, that's when you can bring the things to the table that only you can bring. I firmly believe that there's room for everyone at this proverbial table, and the table only gets bigger, right? But to be able to be at the table and to bring value, that's when you need to bring the things that only you can bring. Everyone's got a unique perspective, right? And bringing that true genius and working through the shame that tells you to stay quiet or stay small, working through those things allows you to bring your true genius to work, and then everyone's better for it. And it's also like a social proof. When you bring your genius, you're giving everyone else permission to do the same. And I think that's just how we get better as a human race and in general in the workplace, is make room, and because there is room for everyone to bring their true selves and their true geniuses to work every day.
Yeah. Is it as simple as being authentic and bringing your true self to work and being transparent about who you are as a person, and that will bleed in, or does it take a more concerted approach depending on your environment?
Well, yes and no. Yes to both. And it's not so being authentic is simple. However, it's not easy. So I want to decouple those things, because everyone's like, just be authentic, right? There's no just. First off, I hate that word. No, just being authentic. Being authentic takes courage. It absolutely takes courage to show up as your full true self and just say, this is me, and I'm okay with that. I talk about on our authenticity episode about, my previous role, I worked in a world that was Patagonia vests and khakis, and I would show up in my bright colors and my very feminine outfits and still expect to be taken seriously, because I am serious. So that's me showing up as the full me. Like, this is how I want to show up in the world. I could have easily found the, khaki pantsuit and just tried to fit in, but that's not me. And I would have felt inauthentic trying to fit in. It's not trying to fit in. It's working to belong. And they're 2 very different concepts. Brene Brown talks about that. I love her. But so the idea is simple, but the execution isn't always easy.
Right. And your last position, what's kind of the biggest success for you, or the key success that you found bringing that authentic self to work and your true genius? How did that manifest itself?
Yeah, I am a connector. I'm what's called in the working genius, I have galvanizing, and that is getting people excited about an idea or a process or really anything. If I'm excited about it, I can generally get people excited about it too. And so what I would do is showing up as my full self, not being afraid. I would just talk to people and connect people. And there were so many silos that were operating independently, even though they were interdependent on each other. So there was duplicate processes. There was just so much extra work. And so just by talking to people and showing up and being that natural networker and connector that I am, instead of trying to be something else and just saying, oh, I need to fix this one thing, just talking to people, I was like, hold on, you should actually talk. Like, let's get in a room and all talk this out, and eliminating a lot of duplicate processes, extra work, streamlining a lot of things just by talking and being who I am. So that's one example of a big win.
Yeah. You took, you mentioned galvanizing, getting people excited about things that you're excited about. So something that you do regularly is you've given talks at, I know for sure, Texas Dreaming, quite potentially other places, Salesforce DX for admins. That can be quite a hard thing to get admins excited about, in my own experience as well. Being in like a DevOps background and talking about packaging and source control, those kind of things that people, when I'm explaining these concepts, we're going,
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that experience. Like, why do you give those Salesforce DX for admins sessions? And I'm going to bring it up because when you said it, I was just like, oh my God, yes. You said language is the API of the brain.
Yes,
is a phrase that you taught
words
me.
are APIs for our brains. Working in technology for so long, I was like, oh, this API concept is really cool because I can tell this system to put this data over here via API, right? And I was like, that is the same thing with words. And I've noticed, like, I've been an end user trainer, I've done a lot of trainings, and so I can read when people aren't kind of following me. And I realize, especially for myself, when I'm in a presentation and I hear a word I don't understand, I stop right there and I miss everything that comes after, because I'm like, what does that word mean? And how DX for admins came about was, I walked into a project and I was Salesforce admin, and it was a multi-developer team project, not just Salesforce development, but traditional or other development. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, what's the release management process? How are we moving our changes? Where do I send my change sets? Basically, they're like, we don't use change sets. And I was like, what do I do? Does not compute. I don't understand what you mean. How do you just like make changes in every org? That seems like not a good process. They're like, no, we use Salesforce DX. And I was like, what was that? And so they were like, oh, like it's this thing. And then, started talking all these words I did not understand. Packaging, source control, like just none of these words have entered into my world ever before. And so we call it like dev speak. And I'm like, so you're telling me I have to type codes into this thing and it does a bunch of stuff and then things just appear in places, and I don't understand what any of this means. And this was back in 2018, and so DX was so new that every time I Googled, I got more confused because I'd have to Google the words that were used to describe the thing I originally Googled. So I had to do a lot of double and triple Googling, and I was just like, there was a lot of crying in the bathroom, I'm not gonna lie, because it was just so frustrating. Because I was like, can someone just explain to me what this thing is in words that my admin brain can understand? And I vowed one day, I was in the bathroom crying. I was like, if I can ever freaking figure this out, I'm going to teach anyone and everyone who's interested in learning, like, how to understand this thing, because I know I'm not dumb. I can figure this out. I just need language that I'm familiar with. And so that's how DX for admins was born. And what it really is a vocabulary lesson. This is what an XML file is. It's just a bunch of folders. It's not like this big scary thing, right? And it's, and then taking the language and then putting it into terms that admins understand. Here's what a profile looks like on the back end. One big click I had with Salesforce DX was, in the admin world, we preach clicks, not code. But with Salesforce DX, the clicks are code, and now I can see it. And our example is like, you know that your gas pedal makes the car go, but you really don't know how it makes the car go. Well, Salesforce DX is lifting up the hood and being able to see all the moving parts when you push the gas pedal of, oh, this is how it works, right? And so once I really kind of started wrapping my head around that concept, I was like, okay, this is figure outable. I just need to help translate between this dev speak and admin speak, because there was no bridge, right? And it's like, admins are smart. They are crafty. They are just grit. Like, admins are great. And there's no reason an admin can't understand this. It's just, we need language as the bridge for them to get there. And that's what Salesforce DX for admins is.
Yeah.
Because again, words are APIs for your brain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's some of those key pieces of language that are the hardest to translate in dev speak to, I don't want to call it admin speak, but admin speak?
Yeah. For me, it was like version and source control of like, what is that? Really the concept that prod is not your source of truth, because as an admin, it is. That's where, your live code is. And so the most recent time I did this at Salesforce DX, I explained it as like, you buy a house, but that house you buy isn't yet a home until all your furniture's in it, right? So that's kind of like, you can take your furniture out and move houses. That's similar to your code, right? You can have this production org, you've got all your code in it, and that's your home. But then you can take that code out and extract it, and it lives in this thing called Git, a repository, and I talk about what that is. It's just a place for your code to live. That is outside of a Salesforce org itself, and you can move that into a different house, and then you make that your home. And then you can take that and you can move it to a different house, and you can make that your home. And so that really helped me grasp that prod isn't your source of truth. Your code base is, and understanding that just made everything so much easier.
Yeah, it's like this is your reality. Let's just put that where it needs to be. The furnishings, the decorations, the pictures, they all exist. How you want it to exist is just arranging it all and putting it in there. You speak in analogies a lot. Do you find that helps get your points across, or is that one of those powerful tools that you encourage people to use more in corporate context?
Yes, and because when I started in Salesforce in 2011, a lot of people did not know what it was. They were like, "You're in sales," and I'm like, "Oh no, goodness no." So
I still get that too.
Yeah, and so like, "Are you part of a Salesforce?" I'm like, "No, gosh, no sales for me, thank you." But so I was like, okay, so how can I explain this to people? Like, Salesforce is like a giant Excel spreadsheet that talks to itself. And because people already know what an Excel spreadsheet is, how it's structured, what they use it for. So I find analogies give context to seemingly like kind of information they don't know how to anchor, right? It's like, this is a thing. Again, sourcing, packaging, these are words. I don't know where to put them. I don't know what to do with them. I don't know what they mean. And so analogies for me help give the context of, it's kind of like this, and then you can build on that. Just like, the house analogy. I use analogies all the time. Highly recommend them for training, and for bringing people along on what could be dry or complex topics, because everyone knows, again, what Excel is, right? And how to use it. And it's like, oh, it's structured information, but that talks to itself. So it's like, you've got something on sheet 1 that you can relate to sheet 2, and so it's all baked in, and it all kind of lives together and talks to itself. So I like to, yes, very much highly recommend analogies for helping with complex topics.
Yeah, amazing. Thinking about your journey, if you reflect on your journey and you take the growth and having to cry in the bathroom and learn about Salesforce DX and all of those things, what are, aside from resilience, I guess resilience is kind of the thing that is going to get you places, from failing and getting up. It's a tried and tested method that is preached by pretty much every thought leader out there. It doesn't matter if you fall 28 times as long as you get up 29. What's kind of been some of the aha moments and the key pivotal things that you've learned in that 15-year Salesforce career now that has helped you get to where you are?
That's a good one. I mean, okay, my go-to answer really of how I've gotten anywhere is my mindset. My mindsets are how I'm resilient. Is taking a topic like, I have to walk into DX and I have to figure this out, and shifting my mindset of, instead of, why is this so hard? I can't get it. I'm never gonna get it. This isn't my language. This isn't for me. I could have stayed in that mindset, right? And cried in the bathroom a whole lot more. But I decided that I love helping other people, and that I realized that other people are going to hit this same roadblock. And so I can turn this into a story of triumph. I'm going to figure this out. And when I do, I'm going to teach other people how to do it also. So it becomes bigger than just me, right? I'm not just doing this for myself. I'm doing this for the Ohana, for the community, for anyone who could cry in the bathroom. If I can save, I realized I was like, if I can save one person from crying in the bathroom with what I've gone through, then it's not in vain. And so it becomes like a mission outside of myself to figure this out, that I got to figure this out for all of us. And so, but turning challenges into growth opportunities is 100% how I've gotten here. Going back, I went to school for fashion merchandising. I wanted to be a buyer for Neiman Marcus. I'm a little fashion girly. And I graduated at a really terrible time in 2008. And so Salesforce landed in my lap, a lot of accidental admins. And I was like, this is really cool. This is an opportunity to figure this out. It becomes a problem, like a puzzle, trying to put it together. And learning that to keep on learning that I can learn, and learning that I can grow through that. So for me, and that's what I coach on in our coaching. And that's one thing I bring into She Makes It Work in all our videos, is like the mindset and the language around how to reframe any situation that doesn't seem to go from, why is this happening to me, to the belief of, this is happening for me. I just don't know how yet.
Yeah. My follow-on question to that is, you solve these hard problems, you solve these hard challenges and their growth opportunities. How do you advocate for yourself after the fact and take on the next challenge?
Well, counting your wins is super important. A lot of, being a woman in tech, it's, you feel like you can't brag about yourself.
You can't brag. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you just, I need to stay humble. And I'm a co-lead of Women in Tech user group in Dallas. And one thing I started doing was, let's go around and let's have a brag session. What are you proud of? And that was such a game changer for the whole group, because we were like, we realized we don't get that opportunity a lot. And so whether it's with someone else, when you're journal or whatever, just taking the time to be like, damn, I did that. Like, go me, like, be your own hype person, right? Have, or call your hype person, find a hype person. Because that is going to get you to the next one. If you can't celebrate your little wins, celebrating your big wins is going to be harder. Right. So definitely celebrating the wins as they come, and looking back and being like, I really did that. And I like the looking back analogy as well. I think it was Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can only connect the dots looking back. And so all these things, again, instead of happening to me or happening for me, once you turn around and look back at all your wins, you can then see how those things are happening for you. And that gives you more energy and more gumption to go for the next thing. It's like, well, I've done this. It's building a foundation of little wins, right? It's little win, and then next thing, you've got a lot of little wins that add to big wins and give you that, that tenacity to fight through of like, I've done this before, I can do it again.
Yeah, I think connecting the dots is as much about storytelling too. Yeah. If you have each one of those dots as a win, I think that's one of the things that people that I speak to, the job market at the moment is a little bit scary, I think, still for people. Yeah. A lot of friends going through recruitment processes, and plenty of setbacks, which makes me sad to speak about it. Like, I'm speaking in like a bit of a dejected tone right now, because my heart breaks for these people, because they're brilliant, amazing people. And that's the one piece of advice is I give to them, is like, these are all amazing things that you've done. Like, just learn to storytell with it. I think that's one of those powerful things that we're not maybe taught enough to do. There's like all of these things, like the data tells a story is a great example. It's just like in our companies, we're used to dealing with a load of data. What story can you make that tell? Or like, how can you sell that back to business? And you got to do that with your own career too. You got to take all of those wins and tell a story with it. And I'd love to see that more. Is that something that you're going to talk about and She Makes It Work? I guess.
Absolutely. Like this, I could riff on this topic exactly because, as an example, I have a self-taught presentation that I do of how through language I got better at my job. And I had a woman asked me a question on the call, and she's like, "Well, I've only been doing this for a year, and I'm da 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 da." And I was like, "Hold on, like Zach Morris time out here. I'm aging myself." But I was like, why did you even use the word only? You've been doing this for a year. And so that's exactly the example of language and storytelling. The same exact credentials, the same exact fact can go one of two ways. I've only been doing this for a year, or I've been doing this for a year and I know a lot more than I did a year ago. Yeah. It's the same thing. It's just how are you framing it? What language are you using around it? And which one, if you heard somebody say, which one would you believe more? Well, I've only been doing this for a year. I don't know, da, da, da. Or I've been doing this for a year. I've seen a couple things and I've learned this, this, and this. Which one sounds more that you want to believe what they're going to say?
Yeah. I think another great example of that is the classic interview question. You get asked a question that you don't know the answer to. Like say, oh, I don't know. I think it could be this versus I don't know, but this is how I would go and figure it out.
Exactly.
You know, that example is amazing. I got a kind of a question is about what we as leaders, for the men listening to this podcast that are in senior or executive positions, managerial positions, what is your advice to them to help uplift the amazing women that might be struggling with that self-advocacy piece or telling that story to pull these amazing people up?
Great question. Thank you for asking that. There's a lot of different things you can do. One of my favorites though is something I do with people is seeing that they're struggling, but also realizing that especially women are conditioned to not be as outspoken as men. Just realizing that actual fact that the same behavior in men that's rewarded is actually punished and not as welcomed in women. So realizing that, so it's not the personality trait of the woman, it's social conditioning, first off. So knowing that we've started here, it's like when a woman says something, listen. don't make the mistake of, okay, a woman says something, but then a man goes and says the exact same thing and then think, oh, that's a great idea that the man said it, when actually the woman said it first. Amplifying that, say, when that happens, you can say, that's a great idea, John, that, exactly what Karina just said, right? So realizing when that happens, just knowing that is a thing is, again, we can't fix what we're not aware of. So just realizing that that's an actual thing. And, so there are women know what they're talking about. So when they do say something, because we're socialized to stay quiet, when we do speak up, best believe that you're
passionate about it.
We know where we're coming from, and we have the backing. Like, we know what we're talking about. If we speak up at all, we know what we're talking about, because trust us, we have already gone through the ringer that, oh, I shouldn't say something. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's like, actually, no, really think I do. So when a woman comes and says, well, I think maybe we should, girl, she already knows. Like, she's using buffer language to seem more likable, but she already knows what she's talking about. So listen.
Listening is an art form. I think generally, generally speaking. What on the flip side of that, if from a perspective, if you're a quiet person in a room, or known for being a quiet person in the room, and anybody that listens a lot and chooses to speak less, I think the quieter people in the room are, or it's often touted that the quieter people in the room are usually the smarter people in the room, because they're listening, observing, and then taking everything in so that they can go and action it. How do you make sure that you're heard in a way that is conducive and going to be well received, or at least that people are receptive to it, to communicating your thought process back out there? It's something that I had Nadina Lisbon on this podcast recently as well, and she was talking about how the way that her brain works is just like, if I'm coming to you with something, it's because I've already digested it and I've already thought everything through, and this is it. Know that I've considered every single angle. And she talked about her journey and that experience. From your perspective, how do you make the case for that and make sure that you're listened to first time, or have that encouragement to make sure that when you speak you are heard? I guess I'm phrasing this really badly.
No, I get what you're saying. There's a lot of that is outside of your control, because you can't make anyone do anything. However, you can, and I go back to this. Back up. I spoke about this at Harvard. I've spoken at Harvard a couple times, and my first thing is
nice. By the way,
thank you. My first tip is believe you belong there. Because if you don't believe you belong there, you're not going to say the thing that only you can say, which goes back to bringing your full genius. So believe that you belong in the room you're in. Believe that what you have to say is going to add value. Believing in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to. That's just how it is, right? So first off is believing that what you have to say is going to add value, and then saying it. And you can't guarantee everything you're going to say is going to land, but you have to trust in yourself that you know what you're talking about and that you're adding value. And you can phrase it however is most authentic to you. I do a session around how buffer words keep us from our ideas. If you're saying, if you're the Salesforce expert in the room, for example, and I'm going to use myself, this is something I did in the past, and how I got here was I was the Salesforce expert in the room, and people would say, what should we do? And I was like, well, I think maybe we should. All of that was unnecessary. Just say, this is what I think. Cut out those buffer words. I think maybe, we should think about maybe like, anything that keeps you from directly saying your idea is what I call a buffer word. It literally keeps you and your idea apart. And I have theories on why we do this, especially as women, because it makes us more likable. But it's also what I think contributes to our ideas getting stolen. Because it's like, oh, I think maybe we should consider one day possibly. And then somebody's like, oh, actually, that's a good idea. I'm going to pick that up, because she didn't really own it, right? So owning your idea and saying, this is what I think we should do. Especially if you're the expert in the room, nobody else has anything more than you, likely. And not being married to that idea and saying, hey, if it can be broken, let's make it better. And not saying if my idea is rejected, I'm rejected. It's not the same thing. So decoupling, those two concepts. But if you don't believe you belong there and what you say is going to add value, you're not going to speak up. You're not going to be heard. You're not going to further in your career. You're going to hold yourself back. So I think that in monitoring your language, this is what I did, is I ran an experiment on my language, because I had that exact problem happen. Is I told my boss, I was like, I think this is what we should do. But I didn't say it as that directly. And then 6 weeks later, he was like, what should we do here? And I was like, I swear I'm in the Twilight Zone, because I swear I've already said this. And so I was like, why isn't he hearing me? What could I be doing that's contributing to him not hearing me? And I did an audit on my language and realized I was doing that. I think maybe we should consider, and I could be wrong, but as an expert, don't say that. You can always say that after the fact, but don't lead in with that. Don't say, I could be wrong, but, because you just negated everything you're about to say. It's like, why should I trust you if you think before you even say your idea, I could be wrong, right? Yeah, we all could be wrong. Let that go. Set that down. You don't have to qualify your idea. You don't have to get validation to contribute.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, any one of us in any one of our roles is working with the information that they have and making decisions based on that information. And a lot of the times it works out, and it's probably going to work out a lot more times than you think. I can think of a number of occasions where I've been like, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if it's going to work out, but I'll do it anyway. And the results have been great. And, just just do it. You've only got there. There's only so many days, weeks, months, and years that we have here. It's kind of too short to keep second guessing yourself.
Yeah, life's too short to hold in your good ideas.
Yeah. You mentioned auditing your language. How does one audit one's language?
Yeah. So I'm a business analyst at heart. And so I took a business analyst approach of discovery, like just like reading my emails before I would send them, becoming aware of, okay, I think I do this thing. Let me look for that, because it's the red car theory of when you may not notice red cars until you think about a red car, and then you see red cars everywhere. It's the same kind of principle. Another analogy. Same kind of principle of, I think I'm saying, and maybe saying sorry too much, or diminishing my own value. How am I doing that? And how I did it was typing emails. I would type the email. I wouldn't edit it first. I would type it out the way I thought, and then like, okay, let me go back and proofread and be my own editor of where am I discounting myself, my ideas, where do I have buffer words, where am I using sorry, am I apologizing for my existence, like sorry for the email, I just want to let you know, no, your job is to send emails and communicate. Don't apologize for doing them, for sending them, right? So really just getting curious of like, how am I doing this? Because you probably are. It's not if you're doing it, it's how. How am I doing this? And then starting to notice patterns, moving into that analysis phase of analyzing, how am I doing it? Where am I doing it? In what ways? And not shaming yourself. That's why I like to frame things as an experiment, because it's a pass or fail. It's not a judgment or a personality, call of, so an experiment allows you to just observe without judgment, because the second you start shaming yourself, that is just a shutdown spiral, and shame's not a motivator. So getting curious about, how am I doing this? How could I show up differently, and get curious around those things. And then once you have all that information, it's like, okay, now you know what you're doing. Now you get to choose, are you going to continue doing that or not? And if not, what are you going to do instead? Making an action plan, saying, okay, I realize I say sorry a lot. I'm going to stop for 7 days not using the word sorry. I have to use a different word. Instead of saying sorry, I say, I apologize, but it doesn't make sense to say I apologize for the email, because that I'm supposed to send the email. So I'm just not going to say that. And then if I, sincerely mess up, then yes, I'm going to apologize for that thing if I would expect an apology back. But if I wouldn't expect an apology, I'm not going to apologize. So coming up with that action plan of how are you going to change your language to say what you really mean, because you don't actually mean sorry for the email. You're trying to be liked, or you're trying to, again, be polite. You're not actually sorry for it. So you're not actually saying what you really mean. Therefore, people can pick up on that vibe of when you're not saying what you really mean. And so you give this air of inauthenticity, even though you don't mean to, and people trust you less. People trust people who are authentic, because authenticity is like 400 times more powerful than love. It's the most powerful human emotion. So that's what people can connect with, is that authenticity. But if you're saying things you don't mean, you're blocking that connection.
Yeah, that's such an interesting perspective, and I never heard it explained like that. I love what you said about experience as well. Like, I think scientists, the first time they blew something up just by seeing to see what would happen, they're just like, oh, it blew up, I'm not going to do that again.
Okay.
And that's okay. Like, but if they didn't experiment with that and find out what the result was going to be, then they wouldn't know not to do it, or what have you. You don't learn anything if you don't experiment, and if you don't try and test these things out. Some things will work, some things won't. And I think in our jobs and in corporate, or even our lives, when, like, we gotta, just because I've never done this thing before, I don't know what the result is going to be. That, like, I think it could be XYZ. A lot of us are hypothesizing on feelings or emotions which get in the way of execution. Or A/B testing emails, I guess, would be like a corporate example. You don't know what's going to happen. Experiment, test it out.
Try it out, see what happens. But at no point in that journey do you need to judge it. and make it about who you are as a person. I believe we're always doing the best we can at any moment with what we have. We just may not have as much as we need to get the ultimate, best outcome. But how we get there is bumping into stuff. I mean, that's literally how centers of excellence are created at companies, is like, we tried a bunch of stuff. We know what not to do. Here's what to do. Right?
Yeah. 1,000,000%. Abi, if you could give the listeners one piece of like closing advice or one thing to consider or take forward from this conversation or into the future, what would that thing be?
One thing. Oh gosh, there's so many.
Just put you on the spot.
I know.
I'm sorry, but not really.
Gosh, I'm kind of going to recap the things I've said. Is believe you belong there first and foremost. No matter if you've been Salesforcing for 5 minutes or 15 years, believe you belong there, because if you don't believe you belong there, you're not going to show up in the way that only you can. And remember, your language is so powerful. It is the software program that our brains run, and it's time for a software upgrade, right? We upgrade our iOS all the time, but how often do we upgrade our internal programming? It's time for an upgrade. Ditch these words that are holding you back, and really run that experiment and see where you're holding yourself back, and make a change and see what happens.
Just do it. Experiment.
Go for it.
Abi, where can we find She Makes It Work?
Yes, we are shemakesitwork.com, but work does not have an O because somebody already had that domain. So we had to drop the O in work. So shemakesitwork.com, but especially on YouTube, you can search She Makes It Work, just regular She Makes It Work. And then we're on all the socials. And coming up, though, we are sponsoring Witness Success August 2nd and 3rd. So in Louisville, Kentucky. So I'll plug the conference. It's a Women in Tech conference. It's amazing. We're sponsoring that, so you can find us in person there. And then you can definitely check us out on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Yes, get your butts to Louisville, Kentucky. I had the pleasure of attending for the first time last year, and I learned a hell of a lot. Just from my perspective, I didn't talk, I didn't speak at it really. I just listened, and it was one of the best things I do. So another plug for Witness Success. We'll put a link in the description for that as well. Abi, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me on. This is amazing.
You're very welcome. I hope everybody that is listening to the episode or watched the episode has really enjoyed it. Useful links from the episode are obviously down in the description. We hope to see you in Louisville, Kentucky on 2nd and 3rd of August. And if you've enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe on whichever platform you are. And Abi, again, thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.